Half a day. I'm Dawn Lees Regis, and welcome to a journey through abstraction. After experiencing the Chamorro culture for more than 30 years, my work has become a fusion of Western and local culture. I work in a wide variety of media and move back and forth from realism to abstraction. Despite my years of experience, I believe it's important to revisit the basics now and then, to reaffirm what I know and make a stronger connection with what seems forgotten. In this reconnection, I wanted to do more than just look at the work of artists of the 20th century. I wanted to understand what they thought about, what they were influenced by, and how Western abstraction developed. Artists are rebels and rule breakers. In almost every case in the history of art, the movement that is popular at one moment is intent on breaking the rules of art from the movement that preceded it. Artists of the 20th century were influenced by spiritualism, philosophy, psychology, science, and other cultures. They learned from each other and from art from the past. So join me on a journey through abstraction. Abstraction. First of all, what is it? Webster's gives this definition. Clearly, the fourth point applies to us, but when we're through here, I'll bet you'll be able to apply several other points as well. A simplistic way to look at the definition of abstract art is to say that the subject matter is reduced to the basic elements of art. That is, line, shape, space, color, and texture. In other words, abstract artists are painting about the basic elements of art instead of painting about persons, places, or things. Visually, it looks like this. Here is a detail of a painting done by Sandro Botticelli in 1478, in which he is illustrating an allegory of spring. All the details are there. You can tell in an instant what's going on in this painting, and your focus is immediately drawn to the three women dancing in a forest. But take away the details, exaggerate the shapes, change up the colors, and place an emphasis on line, and you get a nicely composed abstraction like this. This abstraction is still figurative enough that you can see three women dancing, but there is an entirely different feel to the work. It invites you to think a bit more about what is happening, and maybe even wonder why the artist chose those particular colors. But what about the work of native peoples? Are they not, by our definition, abstractions? Technically, yes, but the distinction I want to make is in the intention behind the work. Although there is no way of knowing why ancient people did cave drawings, I believe it's safe to assume that there was no intention to change the direction of society, to change the rules of art, and certainly no intention of making money from the work. Generally speaking, native peoples created or performed as part of a ritual or ceremony for the good of their people and for the perpetuation of their culture. Navajo sand paintings, for example, were done for healing purposes. Through chanting and gestures, the ancestors came through the painting and helped to heal the sick person sitting on the painting. Once this ceremony was completed, the sand painting was considered toxic and destroyed. A mandala is used as a spiritual and ritual symbol in Asian cultures. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the belief is that by meditating on the mandala from the outer edges to the center, you are guided through the cosmic process of transforming the universe from one of suffering into one of joy and happiness. African masks are important in this presentation because 20th century artists were highly influenced by them. Historically, masks have a spiritual and religious meaning and are used in ritual dances and social and religious events. Some combine human and animal features to unite man with his natural environment. This bond with nature and the spirit world is of great importance to many tribal cultures, and masks are used to express this relationship. In most traditional African cultures, the person who wears a ritual mask conceptually loses his or her human life and turns into the spirit represented by the mask itself. In most cases, mask making is an art that is passed on from father to son, along with the knowledge of the symbolic meanings conveyed by these masks. The trouble with Western abstract art is that it has been and remains so cerebral that if you are not in the middle of it or not willing to follow each movement and try to understand the approach, you get left behind. And when that happens, we are left with this kind of response, like I don't get it. Or, I could do that. Or, I've seen elephants do better paintings than that. And my all-time favorite is, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. So let's take this journey together and see if we can dispel the strength of some of those statements. In any case, when we're through here and you still don't have an appreciation for abstract art, then at least you will be making a somewhat educated decision, which is the most anyone can hope for. The modern abstraction movement is rooted in symbolism and mysticism. Odilon Redon was the leading artist of the French symbolist movement. During his early years as an artist, Redon created a series of predominantly black artworks referred to as noirs, representing an exploration of his internal feelings and psyche. His works were described as a synthesis of nightmares and dreams. Redon's assertion that black is the most important color is rooted in a powerful attraction to the world of the night, which he said was filled with phantoms, dreams, and obscure fantasies of the indeterminate. His figures were often hybrid creatures mixing human, animal, and plant elements. In the early 1900s, Redon switched to the use of pastels, and like most symbolist artists, was highly influenced by different religions and philosophies. One day after a storm, I was walking on the beach, and I saw these pago leaves, burned by salt air, dancing in the wind, and it made me think of ballerinas. So for this piece, Les Danseuses, you can see that I applied Redon's use of hybrid creatures by turning the leaves into ballerinas and using the dying pago buds for their heads. Before we leave this discussion on symbolism and mysticism, I want you to take a look at the work of a more modern artist named Susan Sidon Boulay. She lived between 1941 and 1997. Originally from Brazil, Boulay grew up on a farm where animals and nature were a big part of her life. Later, she immigrated to the United States and settled in California, where she continued to work in her unique style, which evolved into a complex layering of images that mixed human, plants, and animals. This created a shamanic and goddess feel to her work, and she drew her inspiration from a wide variety of sources, such as mythology and poetry, Jungian psychology, and worldwide spiritual traditions. She also maintained her deep love of animals and the natural world. For this piece titled Nidzuk, I applied some of the same ideas as Boulay as I combined plant elements, which is the base of the palm frond, with human and animal images. The human is wearing the palm frond as a mask and has a clear connection to this plant and also her wild self, as represented by the wolf elements in the painting. Skipping over Impressionism and Pointillism, I wanted to spend some of my study time on Fauvism. The leaders of the Fauvist movement were André Derain and Henri Matisse, who worked together during the summer of 1905 to create a body of work shown at the Salon d'Automne. The term Fauvism comes from the French word for wild beasts, a term coined by critic Louis Vaucel after viewing the boldly colored canvases of Derain and Matisse for the first time. This is an extreme development of post-impressionist art. Fauvist paintings are characterized by bright colors and very loose brushwork. Fauvist painting techniques also draw on elements from Pointillism and Neo-Impressionism. Important artists influencing this movement were Paul Cézanne and Paul Gauguin. The Guam texture inspiration for this painting are these ironwood tree roots found at the base of Tarzan Falls. I think it's easy to see how I applied Fauvist techniques by choosing bright colors that are not really part of the natural world of tree roots, and by using loose brush strokes. I enjoyed the free-flowing sensibility of the roots themselves and tried to express that idea in the composition. We're moving into Cubism now, but before we go there, I want you to take a look at this messy timeline which depicts all the influences for and because of Cubism. It's so complicated and really just looks like a lot of spaghetti. But by looking at this, I hope you can get the sense that 20th century developments in art were many and varied, to say the least. It's important to see this because Cubism has been considered the most influential art movement of the 20th century, revolutionizing European painting and sculpture. In the early 20th century, artists like Pablo Picasso and André Duran were inspired by the bold abstract designs that they discovered in African tribal masks. They collected and used these works of art to influence their own styles of Cubism and Fauvism. In effect, they used African culture to refresh the tired traditions of figure painting in Western art. The primary influence of Cubism was Paul Cézanne's late work, where objects in nature were painted with flat color blocks that left out all detail, like the examples that you see here. Seeing his work, Cubist artists started thinking about this new reality that Cézanne presented and began to break objects down into squares, triangles, circles, and other geometric shapes. But because the approach was to look at objects from multiple viewpoints, squares became cubes, thus the name Cubism. The Cubist movement was pioneered by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque, later to be joined by Jean Metzinger, Robert Delaunay, Fernand Léger, and many others. The history of Cubism is divided into two phases, analytical and synthetic. Analytical Cubism was a short but highly influential movement occurring between 1910 and 1912, which presents objects from multiple viewpoints to convey a physical and psychological sense of the fluidity of consciousness. Analytical Cubists tended towards muted earth tones and often allowed the composition to move out beyond the boundaries of the canvas. The Guam texture's inspiration for Pung Lao was this land crab who tried to attack my camera in the boonies. In Pung Lao, I broke up the image of the land crab into geometric shapes, with some organic shapes included in the manner of Jean Metzinger. I also followed his color choices somewhat. My work is very simplified compared to his, but it was really fun to do, and I highly recommend you try it. Synthetic Cubism was developed between 1912 and 1920 and remained a vital movement until Surrealism gained popularity. Compared to analytical Cubism, synthetic Cubism was more detail-oriented and focused more on texture, color, and shapes to build new images. Synthetic Cubism tends toward brighter colors, a flatter surface, and also introduce collage elements as an integral part of the subject matter. Pablo Picasso, Juan Gris, and Georges Braque all produced synthetic Cubist pieces. In keeping with the concept of building new images, I did a line drawing of the photo of Langasat buds that you see here. Then I cut it apart into shapes and reconstructed the pieces into a new composition. The collage elements are rubbings from trees and leaves, and I also put a real Langasat leaf, which had been chewed on by insects, into the composition. I have to say that I never really connected with Cubism much before, but after applying these techniques to my own work, I find I really enjoy the playfulness and strength of Cubist work. Surrealism developed in Europe in the aftermath of World War I and was officially established in 1924 when the French poet André Breton published the Surrealist Manifesto. The aim of Surrealism is to allow the unconscious the freedom to express itself and is best known for associations with the dream state, with illogical scenes, and creatures created from random objects. Surrealist artists wanted to revolutionize human experience, freeing people from false rationality and restrictive social customs and structures. Other well-known surrealists include Leonore Fini, Frida Kahlo, and Merritt Oppenheim. Fini's paintings often featured women in positions of power, while Kahlo's paintings often presented herself as a strong figure despite her painful psychic or physical state. Merritt Oppenheim created her best-known piece Object following a conversation she had with Pablo Picasso about a fur bracelet she was wearing. In this piece, Oppenheim sought to liberate the saucer, spoon, and teacup from the original functions as consumer objects, inviting the viewer to dwell in the presentation of a new reality while questioning the functionality of ordinary objects. Spirit Guide 3 is influenced by Oppenheim, Kahlo, and Feeney. Based on a carabao footprint in the mud, my work is a reference to our deep attachment to Mother Earth, despite how transient our existence may be. Blackwater is a piece that developed as a result of a trance-like dream state that was induced by the meditative practice of deep breathing. I placed it here with surrealism, but it clearly has mystical and, as you will see, abstract expressionist elements. Such as art, though, it often does not easily fit neatly into any one category, but that keeps everything pretty interesting. The term biomorphic abstraction refers to the use of rounded forms based on those found in nature. Biomorphic abstraction is not so much a movement as it is a way of presenting forms in art. Juan Miró was a Spanish painter, sculptor, and ceramicist, and generally considered a surrealist artist. However, his painting Harlequinade is a good example of biomorphic forms in a composition. Vasily Kandinsky, Russian artist and theorist, was initially trained in law and economics and didn't start painting until the age of 30. As an art theorist, Kandinsky determined that it was the artist's mission in life to lead humanity to a spiritual pinnacle. He published a number of books in which he developed a complex theory about how colors and shapes affect humans emotionally. His color theories are still used in art education today. Kandinsky is generally credited as the pioneer of abstract art. In Sandscape, I wanted to represent shapes made in the sand by receiving water in the same free-flowing and organic manner as Kandinsky's compositions. Even though the source photo is monochromatic, I was thinking about Kandinsky's theories on how color and shape affect human emotion. As I developed my composition, I wanted to express happy and stimulated emotions, which are feelings I often associate with being on the beach. Collage and decorative art are also not really movements of the 20th century. But because Henri Matisse is well known as one of the artists defining the revolutionary development of 20th century art, I wanted his cutouts represented in my journey through abstraction. Toward the end of Matisse's life, a severe illness and confinement to a wheelchair made it difficult for him to create art in traditional ways. For his cutouts, Matisse used his father's tailoring shears and some pre-painted sheets of paper to cut shapes that were then used to make large, highly distinctive compositions. Important to point out here is that the act of cutting out shapes and making designs with them is something women have been doing for ages in quilting. This process was relegated to the world of craft by art historians and therefore not considered as important as the fine art as created by Matisse. Feminist artist Miriam Shapiro attempted to rectify this undervaluation of women's traditional work by presenting strong feminine images and using fabrics that were typically associated with women. Shapiro, along with Judy Chicago, were responsible for establishing the CalArts Feminist Art Program and the groundbreaking installation project Woman House in the early 1970s. In my piece, Jewels of the Sea, I followed the examples of Matisse and Shapiro, using fabrics that had some special significance to me. I stuffed the pieces for the squid forms, as quilters might do, and used beads as decorative elements to create a composition about how soft and hard surfaces can commingle in the ocean. Considered the first of the great post-war art movements with roots in surrealism, abstract expressionism was a response to the psychological impact of genocide and the atom bomb. This movement combined the cerebral elements of abstraction with the emotive and evocative elements of expressionism. Historians break the movement into two types. The first, typified by Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning, is gestural, energetic, and often figurative. By the 1950s, the figurative element dissolved into more fluid shapes that are more purely abstract and tranquil, such as the work of Elaine de Kooning and Helen Frankenthaler. Helen Frankenthaler's work is identified with fluid shapes, abstract masses, and lyrical gestures, and is considered to be an important contribution to post-war American painting. Artists who influenced her work were Rufino Tamayo, Paul Feely, Hans Hofmann, and Jackson Pollock. I want to take some time here to talk about time. When people view my work, one of the first questions often asked is, how long did it take you to do that? Although I recognize that we are conditioned to equate value to time spent, this question associated with my artwork is always a bit disturbing. My first impulse is to quip, my whole life. Though seemingly sarcastic, it's a true statement. I actually did my first watercolor when I was 12, and everything I've done since then is part of my development as an artist. So to apply an hourly wage value to artwork really is irrelevant. This piece, Reflecting Pool, didn't take long by itself, but I had several disasters that immediately preceded it. Then, add in all of the study time plus my years of experience with the medium, and you can see that the whole life response is appropriate. Abstract expressionists of the 20th century did their work without plans and without preliminary drawings. Helen Frankenthaler has said that it often took 10 or more tries before she got a good one. This way of working is not for the faint of heart, or for someone with strong desires to control the outcome. I love this piece largely because it was so difficult, and I would challenge you to try this way of painting yourself. Post-painterly abstraction is a broad term that encompasses a variety of styles that evolved in reaction to the painterly and gestural approaches of abstract expressionism. This movement was a rejection of the inwardness and mysticism prevalent in abstract expressionism, and instead embraced a brutally factual kind of art that focused solely on the basic elements of form, color, texture, scale, and composition. Frank Stella is a key figure in modernism. His work focused on minimalism, post-painterly abstraction, and field color painting. Other artists in the movement include Kenneth Nolan and Ellsworth Kelly. I've also included a work by Bridget Riley for the sake of comparison. You'll note that her painting was done 30 years after the piece by Ellsworth Kelly, but they are very similar. Her work is categorized as op art, or art that elicits an optical illusion. This is just one more example of how artists learn from each other. Of all the work I did for this Guam Texture series, this one was the most difficult. The first challenge was in overcoming my dislike of unpainterly paintings. I like all the brush strokes and complications that happen when paint mixes and blends on a surface. Such is not the case for post-painterly abstraction. The second challenge was finding a Guam texture subject that I wanted to paint in a style that eliminates all texture. The third challenge was in the execution. It is not so easy at all to paint straight lines and eliminate all texture, including brush strokes, without using other tools. Each shape needed several layers of paint in order to obtain a certain density in the spaces. And lastly, making sure the color composition worked took a lot of thought. Figuration is also a category that is not a movement per se, but more a way of working. Figuration describes any form of modern art that retains strong references to the real world, and in particular the human figure. From 1920 forward, Pablo Picasso and Alberto Giacometti were the great exemplars of figurative art. Rufino Tamayo, Mexican painter, printmaker, and sculptor, is known for his figurative abstractions with surrealist influences. Instead of the ideological subject matter presented by his peers Diego Rivera, David Siqueiros, and Jose Orozco, Tamayo chose a more intimate focus on tradition and the indigenous groups of his hometown, Oaxaca de Juarez. Historians note that Tamayo is one of the great colorists, favoring a limited palette that, through layering, results in rich textural surfaces that glow as though the sun were shining through his work. While walking my dog at the University of Guam, I came across this amazing Dao tree with complex roots pushing up through the earth, looking very strong, yet willing to sit quietly with all the debris dropped from the tree. And I especially liked the very feminine-looking figure that appeared in this root grouping that you can see in the source photo. For this piece, I worked with a bright acrylic wash for an underpainting and then used layers and layers of pastels to achieve a dense yet luminous color palette in the manner of Rufino Tamayo. This piece is one of my favorites of the series. And now we've reached the end of this presentation with a few samples of artwork from the 1970s forward. The 100 years encompassing artwork from the late 1870s to the 1970s is called Modernism, with all the movements and ways of painting that we have reviewed, and then some. From the 1970s forward, we witness what historians call postmodernism and postmodernism. Artists in this era, including myself, continue to perform their craft by defining the rules of art that work for them. It is often thought about as the anything goes era. There are so many artists working that it's impossible to represent them all in this presentation. For my project, though, I looked at the work of Nancy Graves. Nancy Graves is an American artist known mostly for her multimedia pieces and large sculptures. She has also worked in painting, drawing, printmaking, and film. Though most known for her life-size camel sculpture shown during a solo exhibit at the Whitney Museum, her mature work was often based on aerial views of mapping data, the moon, seafloors, and information provided by NASA. Graves has always been willing to try new things and did not allow the fact that the art world was and remains predominantly male stop her from doing what she wanted. For Alternate Universe, I was looking at the print by Nancy Graves called Vertigo. Her print was influenced by images of space. My work is influenced by the small mounds that crabs make in the sandy part of the reef. I thought the comparison was pretty cool since Nancy Graves' piece was about other worlds in a giant outer space, and my piece is about a smaller but no less significant world that is made by tiny creatures. The final 3 slides are additional work I completed for the Guam Textures series. This one, Seaweeds 2, is in my opinion abstract expressionist in nature, but more controlled in execution. I spent time looking at the source photo and trying to get a psychic understanding about how those seaweeds feel as the water moves in and out and around, pushing the seaweeds this way and that. There is some controlled energy there that seemed important to me to express. For Morning Lights, my intention was to really focus on the light that was bouncing off the wet sand and also imagining the energy of the water, the pulling and sucking of the tide that would make those strong shapes in the sand. Of all the styles we have looked at in this presentation, which ones would you apply to this piece? Morning Lights 2 was inspired by the beautiful colors and shapes found in Guam dirt after a rainstorm. While looking at the source photo, I could get a feel of how fast water was rushing down the hill and how it pulled the dirt with it. The colors and shapes seemed so soft to me, even after such violence. It was that softness that I wanted to emphasize in this painting, and so I purposely left out the grainy pebbles you can see in the source photo. Thank you for taking this journey with me. During the past hour, you've seen several different movements and ways of working for modern art, and have seen that what artists really like to do is challenge the currently accepted way of doing things with new ways of thinking. For me, the rules change with the specific requirements of the work, but when I'm painting for myself, I find the most satisfaction in abstracted forms found in nature. Guam has inspired me for more than 30 years, and I believe she will continue to do so as time goes on.